All right. Hello. Happy 420. Let's get high. All right. So I wanted to share with you something really cool that I learned in the Torah, which has to do with 420. Not only was the second temple destroyed after 420 years, which is not such a question. But what is a question is that we left Egypt after 420 years. Actually, we were only in Egypt for 210 years. But in the Torah, it counts 420 years. How does it do that? So it counts back, Abraham was sent here by God. And when he had his first child, Yitzchak, so that began the beginning of the Jewish people. And so to God, the exile begins then until we actually come through the sea and become a people on the other side, like a baby being born. And so it comes out, we were in exile. We were, they counted as being in Egypt and Mitzrayim, confined. The word Mitzrayim comes from the word Meitzer, which means confined. And we came out after 420 years, which has always been a question. God said, you'll be for 400 years. So what's with 420? Why 420? I mean, it wouldn't be such a question, except in the same story of the Exodus, of coming out of Mitzrayim, that Moshe says on the last of the 10 plagues, which is going to hit the firstborn of every family in Mitzrayim except for the Jewish people. And at that point, finally, Pharaoh says, get out. And Moshe says it'll be around midnight. So they asked the question, why did Moshe say around midnight? God's going to come at midnight. God certainly knows when it's midnight. We mean around midnight. So the answer is that Moshe, and maybe they would be a few minutes. And so for those few minutes, they would say, Moshe's a liar. He's not a real prophet. He's a liar. See, nobody died. Maybe 2 minutes later, everyone died. But for those 2 minutes, Moshe was concerned that they would say this. So instead of saying at midnight, he said, Lila, like the middle of the night. So in the same breath, God is saying, and you're taking you out after 420 years, when God had said 400 years. And God didn't say around 400 years. God said exactly 400 years, and yet it was 420 years. According to even God's calculations written in the Torah, we were there for 420 years. So I finally got an answer to this. And see, Torah, the translation of the word Torah is teaching. And in every teaching, if your students are learning something, if they ask you a question, that's why I like people ask me questions, You ask me a question, I could, then you feel like you're a teacher, that you woke up someone's curiosity enough that they actually asked a question. And so we're supposed to ask questions. And sometimes you can't find the answer in all the books, everything, now you could read all the books, but you have all the books. There you go, here you go, there. You see, nobody talks about your question. You have this question for a moment. So there's a story about this guy. He was a big Talmid Chachamim, a big Torah scholar. And he was sitting there one day and he was learning the Talmud. And he came to a part of the Talmud. He had learned the Talmud many times. He was very, very excellent in his learning. And he came to this part of the Talmud, and it didn't make any sense to him. And he thought, how could I've learned the Talmud so many times and missed this? And he thought, and he couldn't come to an answer. So, so he decided, I must have done something wrong in my life that had caused this darkness in the Talmud. So he went into his room and he started to cry. He cried to God, please, what did I do wrong? And after some hours of crying and wailing, there's a knock on the door, and he opens the door. Eliyahu Hanavi, the famous prophet who some kind of lived thousands of years ago, but comes now and then to visit the earth, a certain messenger to certain people. And because he left with his body, so he can come back in his body. And so he came back and he told them the answer. This is the answer. So the guy was amazed, and he went back out and he was learning, and he hears the guys learning next to him. They're getting to that place. And maybe they're going to ask the question. He can answer it. And they get to that place and they ask the question and they answer the question and they go on like nothing. And the guy goes back into his room. He's crying. He says, I needed Eliyahu Hanavi. He had to come to me. And, and these guys just went right through it. So again, he's crying and wailing. Until you ask the question and got the answer down from heaven, nobody could ask that question. And no one could answer it. No one asked it. No one could answer it. But this guy broke through. And through his longing for this question, that he brought down new information into the world. So, I don't think that this is new information I'm bringing down. I'm sure someone has written about it somewhere, because it says it, just straight out in the Zohar, that the reason we left 420 years was the year of Yovel. And Yovel is the 50th year. That is a Yovel. We just, the Jewish people are just becoming a people. What, on Yovel? What Yovel? So God's been counting since the first day, since the human being was created. God knows when is Yovel. Every 50 years is Yovel. What happened in Israel, what would happen, in the beginning when they lived according to the law, that they call Shemitah. Every 7 years, you have to rest the ground. Can't plant it, you can't harvest it, and it's open to poor people. They can go and fill their buckets, or everyone has something to eat, but the land, you should be allowed to rest. And people had their land, and they could sell their land if they wanted. They want to go live in the city, or sell my land to a farmer, go live in the city. And after 7 cycles of 7, 49, comes Yovel. And on Yovel, all the property would go back to the original owner. So you could sell it, you could do whatever you want with it. 50 years later, like, you'd never sell your children's inheritance, because, in 50 years, they're going to get their inheritance back. And it's really a very, cool system. We still have Yovel, but we don't do that anymore. It's not practical to do those kind of things. But so Yovel, because that's when all the your debts are forgiven, whatever it is, you just go back and you start over again. So God said, well, it's a great time to go out is Yovel. A great time to go out on the 50th year. The year 4, we went out in the year 420. the beauty of it, I don't know the beauty of it, an extension of it is that, again, we had to wait 50 years after we went out to get the Torah, Yovel. Before the Torah could come out of heaven and come down to the earth, that there needed Yovel, 50 days. So it is a very profound thing, particularly for me, because I've been studying the Torah for 50 years. And now, after many years of striving, of seeing things that, I felt the world really needed this information. And I wrote book after book, and some I published. I never sold any, one or two, and nothing ever went right. And I just couldn't stop writing. And then I wrote Sex, a Metaphor to History, Trump 777 and the 1,000 Years of Woman. And this is like a really, I wrote it very quickly. I wanted to try to get it into the mainstream before the election, which I didn't manage to do. But nonetheless, I did manage, to tell him in my book, to tell Trump that I'm coming for him, and I am. And the next day he got sick with COVID, and I take complete responsibility for that. And I ain't finished. I have another book coming out. And I finally come to a title that I really like, which is Zohar, Brilliance Beyond the Black Hole. And this book is going to prove, without a doubt, right there in the Zohar, I present the Zohar and translate the Zohar, pieces of the Zohar that written 2,000 years ago, which can explain how creation came into being. Not that we came out of a black hole, HOLE, but rather we came out of a black hole, HWOLE. That the black hole is not full of nothing. The black hole is full of everything. And the Zohar explains that in very, very explicit detail, which I take step by step so the reader can understand these things. And just a second. The purpose of doing this is to show that the Big Bang Theory is just absolutely incorrect. And people think that is, and how it's based upon that. We see how much we've been lied to and how much our lives have been stolen from us, because if you can convince the vulnerable human being that life really has no purpose, and the human being wants to have purpose, they will find purpose in anything. You give them something and you tell them to do it, and they will do it. One of the laws in Torah about having a slave, a person could sell themselves to servitude, They can sell themselves to servitude if they wish, and you're allowed to sell yourself for 7 years. Then you have to go free. Unless you really love being a slave, and then you get like a hole in your ear, and you can be a slave for 49 years, but on Jubilee, Yovel, everybody goes out. Even the slave. And because he says he's going to sleep forever, and forever is 50 years. And it's just like it's a real sort of conclusion that's been happening every 50 years since the creation of the first human being on the first day of Tishrei. which is the sixth day of creation. Anyways, so if a person had a slave, that there were made laws about how you could treat the slave, and you couldn't ask them to do a work that wasn't their work. But if you got a slave, he was a farmer. So you can't tell the slave, go out and hoe the ground, because the ground goes on forever, and the slave gets no reward from his work. And you're not allowed, that's considered torture. You're not allowed, you can have a slave, you have to treat him right, you have to treat his family right, sort of like getting a corporate good job. And he has to do what you say, he has to dress like, but you can't ask him to do something that's not even that thing that is his job. You can't ask him to do it, just continue, just do it. Because he gets no reward. You have to tell him, I want you to hoe from here to there, even if it's a mile. I want you to hoe that mile. Nonetheless, he has a goal now. And that's very important to the human being. And if you take that away from the human, you take away the natural goal of the human being, and you replace it with some manufactured goal, which is good for the people who hold power. You can get a lot of people working for them because people want so much to succeed in their lives, and feel that they're a cog in this whole thing. But when they find out they're a cog in some guy's manipulated hidden agenda, then we feel taken. And that's what's happened. And who is really the culprit of all of this? Who is the manufacturer of the big lie? Is Rome, because we live in the Roman Empire. We deal in the Roman economy, the coin of Rome, and the sword of Rome. America is the sword of Rome. The big superpower, having all the big weapons and shit. And who are we going to drop them on? I mean, the whole thing is just absurd. And we spend $1 trillion a year on our defense. And at 9/11, I remember this, we were spending $365 million, $1 billion a year. $365 billion, $1 billion a day we were spending on defense. And one of the first things they said after 9/11 was, if we had more money, we could have stopped them. That's all they want, is more money. And it's interesting that the Pentagon is surrounded by two cities where all the people who work in the Pentagon live. One of them is called Pentagon City, and the other is called Crystal City. And, and they're all known for being big crystal meth. This is what they're, crystal meth makes you very paranoid. And you got these guys taking it and just spending, $1 trillion a year. And they can't spend this money fast enough. I know, like when I was in the Navy, they'd get something that cost $1 million. A year later, the thing was just obsolete. And people just spend, this is the, they talk about the trough, man. This is the real trough, is the military trough. And this is so much, the sign of Rome. You go out in war, and what's wrong with our foreign policy, that we're always competing with we got to be better than China. Who can be better than China? They got 1.5 billion people. For thousands of years, they've learned how to work together. Who can be better than China? Instead of competing with China, we should be cooperating with China. We should be helping them how they can do all this, produce all this stuff, and keep their emissions low. We don't like the fact they're burning coal. Well, maybe we should stop, trying to compete with them and bring them oil. And to help clean up the world. Rome wants to make it like there was this big competition, and the Western civilization, which is Rome, they won. And it's just not true. And we see, even in the politics now, that, with the people so much wanting certain basic things, they still can't get it together, because this is Rome. And even if they get together, they got the courts to deal with, and they're going to say, no, that's not constitutional. So and Rome, that's how Rome works, man. They just tie themselves up, and everything's about a fight, because that's what Rome does. They compete and they fight and they make the rules, so they always win. And this is coming to an end. And I hope that I can be part of this ending by what I'm doing, by the kind of information that I'm putting out into the world, that the rabbis have been afraid to put out and afraid to say, and these things need to be said. And for once, I'm not just working by myself. I actually have some people helping me, and we're going to make this an event. And I hope anyone who listens to this video, watches this video, will go to my website, dovidhouse.com, and maybe tell other people about this website, maybe even what they call it, subscribe to the website. And these things will help in this effort. And my book is being released, God willing, in Germany on July 17th. And July 17th is a very big day to both the Jewish and the Roman people. It is the day that Rome broke through the walls and destroyed the temple on that day. And actually, they broke through the walls, the outer walls, 3 weeks early. And these 3 weeks are called the 3 weeks of mourning. They conclude on the 9th day of the month of Av, the exact same day that 500 years earlier, the first temple had been destroyed. So even this day is a day of, of sadness, not really reckoning. We're just sad on that day. We don't even put on our tefillin until the afternoon. We sit on the floor for the first half of the day, when, at night, and for the first half of the day, because that's when the destruction was the worst. And we sit in mourning, and we fast all day. But it says that this day in the future will become a holiday. So, particularly since it falls on Shabbat, this day, which nobody fasts on, never fast on Shabbat. So, and it says you can push it off, if you push it off one day, we can push it off forever. Because one day, the 9th of Av, is going to be a celebration. So that's what I want to make. I want to make a worldwide celebration about the publication of my book, which is truly going to change the world, because it absolutely proves that both science and religion are just completely wrong, and let them deal with it. So, so whatever energies people can give to help in this regard would be greatly appreciated. And I'm going to keep you informed as the time goes on. And maybe for the rest of my time here, try to kind of allot myself 30 minutes unless people ask me questions. And that we're in now to the 5th week of the 7 weeks. And the 5th week is the week of Hod. And Hod means it's an action, but an action of holding back. And this is, and Hod is known to be beautiful. And it's considered like a murmuring voice. Hod is just really a nice energy. And it's during this time that we celebrate Thursday night, Hod Shebahod, which is the night that Rebbe Shimon, who was the most inner, went the deepest in of anybody, he passed away on this night. And he said, "Do not mourn for me, celebrate." And so people go to the place where he was buried in Miron, which is right across the Wadi from Safat, where I live, up in northern Israel. And on Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day, counting the Omer, People go there and just celebrate. And it's the only celebration that is just has every kind of person in the land goes there. The real religious go there. The real irreligious go there. People just trying to make money go there. I'm sure thieves go there. Some people go there and just camp out for a month, and they'd have a spit there, and they bring an animal, and people have a good time. It's a very good time, and the thing you're supposed to do is look at fire. That's the only thing, it's a real good time to gaze into fire, because the fire, it goes up, and that was Rabbi Shimon. He went up into a really, really high place, and he left us the Zohar. He didn't exactly leave it to us. He left to us 1,000 years later. He transmitted it to the earth, and the Zohar is made in our time. And one of the things that my new book, Zohar, Brilliance Beyond the Black Hole, addresses is why the Zohar, which is very, very difficult to read, and even once you can read it, it's extremely difficult to know what it's talking about. And I have broken the code of the Zohar, and that's what my book is about. And many people, they recently there was a translation of the Zohar, but it's a very academic translation, big translation, took many years, but it's extremely academic, and it's translating the words first in very flowery language, and as a way, in my mind, to disguise that the translator doesn't really know what he's talking about. He's just translating the language, and figure it out for yourself. And that's not really a good translation. I mean, you wouldn't want someone to translate a letter like that. Just translate each word and let you kind of figure it out. And this is more than a letter. I mean, this is like really deep stuff. So, and because up until now, no one has had the key. Well, I shouldn't say we've had the key. The key is the Kabbalah, which has been for 500 years. We've studied the Kabbalah. We've had the Kabbalah, and we've worked the Kabbalah, and many, many books. And this is the key to the Zohar. But no one has turned the key until me. I did it. I wrote it in a book. I'm publish it on the 17th of July, which is the 9th of, and I'm going to turn the world over. So anything you can do to help will be appreciated. The more of us push in the same direction, the faster it will happen. And it's a very, very exciting time for me. And I hope as it gets out into the world that it'll be an exciting time for everybody. We've had it, not just with COVID, but, with these whole 2,000 years of bullshit, we've had it. It's time for a new world. It's time for a new way to understand the world, a new perspective on the world, which is really rooted in ancient things which have shown themselves not only to stand, but in a that they saw much clearer back what we see now. And it's time when all of us are lost in this darkness, with people preaching there is no truth, only dogma, that light is really needed in the world. And that's why the Zohar was saved until our time. In the words of the Zohar, these words are for the end of days, the end of the 6,000-year calendar. We're 5,781, only a few centuries left until we go into the 1,000 years of woman and the 1,000 years of peace. Have a great day, man. Stay high.